I was on my way to pick up my granddaughter from school. That's how the day started. Nothing special, just another afternoon. I'm 79 years old. My knees hurt when I walk too fast. I still drive, but only short distances. School pickup is one of them. I sat in the car line, engine off, watching kids come out in waves, backpacks bouncing, parents waving, life moving forward. When she saw me, she smiled and ran. She always runs. She opened the door and climbed in, talking before she even sat down. I sat in the car line, engine off, watching kids come out in waves, backpacks bouncing, parents waving, life moving forward. When she saw me, she smiled and ran. She always runs. She opened the door and climbed in, talking before she even sat down.
She stared out the window and said, "A boy said something mean to my friend. I didn't stop him. I just stayed quiet." She said it like she was talking about the weather, like it didn't matter. But my hands tightened on the steering wheel, because I knew that sentence. I had lived my whole life inside it. I didn't answer right away. I drove. She kept talking about homework and lunch, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was back somewhere else. I was back in a factory office 30 years ago. A man making a joke that wasn't a joke. Everyone laughing. Me staying quiet. I was back in my 20s, watching someone get blamed for something I knew wasn't their fault. Me saying nothing. I was back at my kitchen table, hearing my wife cry in the bathroom. Me pretending I didn't hear. The car stopped at a red light. I took a breath. "You know," I said slowly, "sometimes staying quiet feels easier." She nodded. "But," I said, "sometimes quiet stays with you longer than the moment." She didn't answer. She was just a kid. But she had already opened something in me. When we got home, she ran inside. I stayed in the car. I turned the engine off and just sat there. At 79, you don't think you have many firsts left, but that moment was one. It was the first time I admitted something to myself. I had stayed quiet my whole life. Not because I was kind, not because I was patient, because I was afraid. I grew up believing that a good man keeps his head down, does his job, doesn't cause trouble. My father was like that. Hard worker, quiet man. He never argued, never spoke up. People called him solid. I learned early that being solid meant being silent. So when I saw wrong things happen, I told myself it wasn't my place. When someone crossed a line, I told myself it wasn't worth it. When I felt something break inside me, I told myself that's just life. I built a whole personality around not speaking. At work, I was dependable, never complained, never challenged anyone. That made me safe. It also made me invisible. There were moments, clear ones, when I knew I should have said something. One time, a younger guy got fired for a mistake that wasn't his. I knew the truth.
I watched him pack his things. He looked at me like he wanted help. I nodded at him. and said nothing. That nod still visits me at night. Another time, my boss crossed a line with a woman in the office. Everyone saw it. Everyone looked away. So did I. I told myself I had a family to feed, bills to pay. That excuse worked for years. At home, it wasn't much different. My wife used to ask me, "Why don't you ever say what you feel?" I'd say, "I'm fine." That was my favorite lie. I thought silence kept the peace. What it really did was build distance. The house got quiet in a bad way, not calm, empty. We didn't fight. People thought that meant we were strong. But sometimes no fighting just means no honesty. When she got sick, I still didn't speak. I handled things, appointments, paperwork, but I never said the things that mattered. Now she's gone, and the words are still here, waiting. That's what people don't tell you about silence. It doesn't disappear. It waits. Sitting in that car after school pickup, I realized something else. My granddaughter didn't need advice. She needed an example, and I had given her the wrong one. I went inside. She was at the table, coloring. I sat across from her. "Hey," I said. She looked up. "About what you said in the car." She got nervous. "I didn't mean." I raised my hand. "It's okay." Then I did something I had almost never done. I told the truth. I said, "When I was younger, I stayed quiet too, a lot, and I regret it." Her eyes got big. "You do?" I nodded. "Some things don't hurt right away," I said, "but they grow." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't want to be quiet like that." I swallowed. Neither did I. But I had already paid the price. At 79, you don't get many chances to fix the past, but maybe you can keep it from repeating. That night, I didn't sleep much, not because of pain, because of clarity. There were things I should have said, moments I should have stood up. I can't change those, but I can finally admit them. And that's how this story starts. Not with regret, with a question from a little girl that made an old man speak for the first time. When you get old, your memory doesn't fade the way people think. The small things disappear. Names, dates. But the moments you stayed quiet when you shouldn't have, those stay sharp. They don't blur. They don't soften. They wait. The first one came back to me that night after my granddaughter went to sleep. I was 26. New job, new marriage, first real paycheck. I worked in a warehouse office. Nothing fancy, just paper, phones, and men who talked loud. There was a guy named Eddie. Quiet kid. Did his job right. One day a shipment went missing. Everyone knew it wasn't Eddie. Everyone. But the boss needed someone to blame, and Eddie was easy. They called him into the office. I stood right there. I heard the lie. I knew the truth. Eddie looked at me, just once, not begging, just hoping. I felt my chest tighten, and I did nothing. I watched him clean out his desk. I nodded like I understood. I told myself, I need this job. I told myself, it's not my fight. Eddie never came back. I don't know what happened to him, but I know what happened to me. Something closed. The next moment came years later. I was a supervisor by then. People listened when I spoke, which made my silence worse. There was a woman on my team, smart, hard-working. One afternoon, my boss put his hand on her shoulder. Too long, too familiar. She froze.
Everyone saw it. Everyone pretended they didn't. I felt heat in my face. I wanted to say something. I thought about my mortgage, my kids' school, my title. So I looked down at my papers. She never complained. She transferred departments a month later. I never forgot her face. At home, silence had a different shape. My wife used to sit at the table after dinner, hands folded, waiting. She'd say, "Did I do something wrong?" I'd say no, but I wouldn't say what I felt. I wouldn't say I was scared, that I felt small, that I didn't know how to be the man she wanted. I thought love meant not making waves. What it really meant was distance. Another memory came back hard. My son was 16. He came home angry, said a teacher embarrassed him in front of the class. I listened, I nodded, then I said, just ignore it. That was my answer to everything. He stopped talking after that. Not that day, slowly. Years later, he told me, "I didn't think you'd have my back." That sentence still hurts. There was a moment at my brother's funeral, a family fight, old wounds. Someone said something cruel about him after he was gone. Everyone looked at me. I was the oldest. I said nothing. I let the words sit in the air like they were true. That silence felt heavier than the coffin. Every time I stayed quiet, I told myself I was choosing peace. But peace that costs you your voice isn't peace, it's surrender. The strange thing is, no one ever thanked me for staying quiet. No one said, "Good job for swallowing that." They just kept expecting it, and I kept delivering. By the time I noticed the pattern, it was already my identity. The quiet one, the easy one, the man who never caused trouble. Inside, I was full of unsaid sentences. They piled up, and now at 79, they're loud. I see how silence teaches silence. My granddaughter learned it in one day at school, just one moment of not speaking. I learned it over a lifetime. That's the difference. And that's why this part hurts. Because every one of these moments was a chance. Not to be brave, just to be honest. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to say, "That's not right." But I didn't. And silence, once chosen, gets easier, until it's the only language you know. Now I'm learning a new one. Late, slow, but real. And the next part, I'll talk about what silence did to my body, my marriage, and what I want my granddaughter, and maybe you, to carry instead of it. When you stay quiet long enough, your body learns it before your mind does. I didn't notice it at first. I just felt tired. Not sleepy tired, deep tired. The kind that doesn't go away. My chest felt tight sometimes. My back ached. I got headaches for no clear reason. Doctors said stress, age. They weren't wrong. They just didn't know the whole story. Silence carries weight, and the body has to hold it. At home, the quiet grew wider. My wife and I shared space, but not much else. We talked about groceries, bills, appointments. Not about fear, not about disappointment, not about the years passing. I thought I was protecting her by not speaking. What I was really doing was leaving her alone with her own thoughts.
She died before I ever said the things that mattered. That's something you don't get over. You just learn how to live around it. After she was gone, people called me strong. They said, "You held it together." I nodded. That's what I was good at. But holding it together isn't the same as being okay. The truth is, silence didn't make my life peaceful. It made it smaller. I lost friendships I could have saved if I'd spoken once. I lost closeness with my kids because I thought feelings were a burden. And I lost years of myself trying not to upset anyone. No one ever asked me to do that. I chose it. That's the hardest part to admit. Sitting with my granddaughter now, watching her grow, I see the same moments coming toward her. Moments where it's easier to stay quiet. Moments where speaking feels risky. And I don't want my life to become her example. So this is what I tell her. I tell her being kind doesn't mean being silent. I tell her you don't have to be loud, you just have to be honest. I tell her if something feels wrong, your body already knows. She listens in her own way. She's still a kid, but seeds matter. And to anyone listening, especially the men, silence is not strength. Strength is speaking once before silence becomes a habit. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to win. You just have to say, "I see this, and it's not okay. I waited too long. I can't go back." But maybe you can pause. Maybe you can speak sooner. At 79, I finally understand this. The moments you stay quiet don't disappear. They follow you. So if a small voice in you is telling you to speak, listen to it. That voice is trying to save you years. And that's all I wanted to say.